Hey guys, Steinixos here. So today, in our power scaling fundamentals series, we're going to be talking about speed. Now speed is easily one of the most important elements in power scaling. Even if you're not deep into power scaling yourself, chances are you've heard someone say something like, this character blitzes this other character, as a quick way to shut down a debate. And honestly, for that reason, many people think speed is the main deciding factor in most matchups. However, this video isn't about ranking the different aspects of power scaling, like whether strength is more important than durability, or whether speed trumps hacks. That's a separate conversation. What we're doing here is taking a focused look at speed itself, how it works within power scaling, how it's used in discussions, and most importantly, addressing some of the recurring points and misunderstandings that come up every single time speed gets brought into a debate. My goal here is to lay this all out clearly so that I don't have to re-explain these points over and over again in future videos or conversations. Now, of note, one of those recurring arguments is the claim that light speed or faster than light movement is impossible in fiction due to real-world physics and real-world biology. This argument comes up a lot, probably the most of all arguments. Thus, I've already dedicated a full video to that topic called the fiction problem. So if you want a deeper dive on that specific argument, then go check out that video. But for everything else, stick with me here. Now, the first major argument that usually comes up about speed, almost universally from people who don't really know much about power scaling, is the claim that if a fictional character can't physically outrun or move at or faster than the speed of light, then there's no way they could possibly be considered light speed or faster in any way. So for example, a common scene that people like to bring up is this panel of Zoro running away from the gas explosion caused by Smiley, and they'll say, look, he's struggling to outrun some fast-moving gas, so how could he possibly be light speed? But arguments like that usually come from, at best, a misunderstanding, and at worst, a complete ignorance of the different types of speed we actually talk about in power scaling. So, in power scaling discussions, speed is typically broken down into 5 main categories: combat attack speed, continuous combat movement speed, reaction speed, travel speed, and teleportation. Now, teleportation isn't really a type of speed in the traditional sense. It's more of a special method of moving instantaneously from one location to another, so we'll just set that one aside for now. Travel speed, on the other hand, refers to how long it takes a character to get from point A to point B, usually across a large distance, without teleporting. And while there's no hard universal rule for what counts as large, generally speaking, if two characters are just a few meters apart in close combat, their movement wouldn't be called travel speed. A good example of travel speed would be the interaction between Kizaru and Drake. Kizaru was clearly a considerable distance away, but since Kizaru is made of light and can move at light speed, he was able to close that distance nearly instantaneously. That's travel speed. But here's the thing, and this is really important. Chopper obviously wouldn't be able to move across that same distance at light speed like Kizaru. However, that doesn't mean that he can't react to or dodge an attack that's moving at light speed, like the laser beam Queen fired at him, which he obviously dodged. And the same goes for Luffy. He might not be able to travel at light speed like Kizaru, but in battle, he can throw punches at faster than light speed to match someone like Kaido. So, the point here is that your travel speed doesn't determine the rest of your speed stats. Just because the crew struggles to outrun a gas explosion doesn't tell you anything about their combat attack speed, reaction speed, or movement during battle. And since most fights in anime or fiction are close quarters combat, travel speed usually doesn't matter that much in the actual fight itself. What does matter, and what's usually being referenced, are the 3 key categories: reaction speed, combat attack speed, and continuous combat movement speed. So, combat attack speed refers to how fast someone can launch an attack, and how fast that attack actually is once it's been fired or unleashed. A good example of this are jutsus from Naruto. You see, most jutsu have 2 components: the speed of the hand signs and the speed of the actual attack once it's formed. So for something like a fireball jutsu, it depends both on how quickly the user can weave the signs and how fast the fireball itself travels once launched. Now, reaction speed, also known as reaction time, is how quickly someone can respond to an action, usually in the form of dodging or blocking. For example, in the same scene where Kizaru appears in front of Drake, you'll notice that Drake wasn't fast enough to react to the incoming kick. that means Kizaru's attack speed was faster than Drake's reaction speed. And another example of this is in Whole Cake Island, where Sanji was so fast that Oven couldn't even perceive him before he landed the hit. Oven couldn't react at all, so his reaction speed was clearly below the speed of Sanji's strike. And probably my favorite example of this is the fight between Byakuya and early Ichigo. You see, Byakuya's speed was so far above Ichigo's reaction speed at that point that even a casual attack left Ichigo completely stunned. He had no idea when he got hit, or even from which direction the attack came. And right after that moment, Byakuya casually follows up with a remark saying that Ichigo even falls slowly. Now compare these events to someone like Chopper, who, even while injured and exhausted, was still able to dodge a point-blank light-speed laser fired by a queen. That tells you that Chopper's reaction speed was above the speed of that laser beam. And finally, continuous combat movement speaks to what speed a character can maintain while actively fighting without break for a certain amount of time. It's not about a one-time reaction or a single fast punch. It's about what they can maintain over time while actively fighting. So in the battle between Luffy and Kaido, you see both of them continuously exchanging blows, matching each other at faster than light speeds. That's not just a reaction or a one-off move, that's consistent combat movement speed. So, to bring it all together, when people look at a scene like Zoro running from gas and use that to say, "See, he's not light speed," they're completely missing the point. That's travel speed, and it has almost nothing to do with how fast Zoro can react, how fast he can attack, or how fast he moves in an actual fight. Understanding the different types of speed is essential, otherwise you're just comparing apples to oranges and won't really understand what's going on in most power scaling discussions. Now, the next major category of arguments that often comes up is about how to properly interpret the speed of characters who use the elements of lightning or light. You see, from our real-world understanding, we all know that lightning and light are extremely fast. In fact, they have very specific speeds. Light travels at about 300,000 meters per second, and lightning travels at a significantly slower, but still extremely high speed. So when a fictional character uses lightning or light in a story, there's always a debate around whether they should automatically be assumed to move at those real-world speeds. And by far, the most common way to address this argument is to first determine whether the character is using the true, natural version of the element, or if they're just using a fake or replicated version created through some fictional energy system. Now, what do I mean by a fake version of the element? You see, in most anime or manga, there's some kind of magical or energy-based system like chakra, ki, mana, or spiritual energy that characters use to create effects resembling lightning or light. These aren't the real elements, but rather they are replicas made from the underlying energy. Take Naruto for example. The power system there is chakra, which is formed by combining physical and spiritual energy. This chakra can then be shaped into techniques like the lightning blade. But the lightning blade isn't real lightning, it's just chakra manipulated to behave like lightning. Same thing in Black Clover, where mana is used to mimic lightning spells. At a base level, it's just magic energy made to look and act like lightning. Now, in my equalization problem video, I explained why this distinction actually matters a lot when analyzing how powers interact. But this difference is also super relevant when we're talking about speed scaling, because if the lightning or light being used isn't the real thing, then it doesn't get to automatically inherit all of the real element's properties, like its speed. An example where this is made explicitly clear is, for example, in Bleach with Candice Catnip. She uses spiritual energy to create lightning-based attacks. But in the Can't Fear Your Own World novels, it's outright stated that her spiritual energy replica of lightning is not as fast as the true natural element of lightning. So, you see, this chronic tendency in certain parts of the power scaling community, particularly in the Bleach fandom, to automatically slap light speed onto anything that so happens to be called light is just completely flawed. Whether it's Quincy Arrows, Cero Blasts, or the Negacion, just because they are called light in their name or description doesn't magically make it move at the speed of light. So again, what I'm saying here, which really should have just been common sense, is that the fake or replicated versions of the elements of light or lightning can't just be automatically assumed to move at the same speed as the true natural versions. But rather, to assign them that kind of speed, it needs to be explicitly confirmed through some other viable method, like a direct, non-fallacious statement, clearly saying they move at that speed, or through relevant feats that actually support it. On the flip side, there are characters who use the real natural elements, and that's where things change. You see, if you follow my channel, then you already know an example of this. That is, Logia Devil Fruit users in One Piece. Logia users are people who become and control a natural element. For instance, Enel is literally lightning, and Kizaru is literally light. And this isn't just headcanon that they use the true natural element, it's confirmed in the manga, in the SBS, which is a Q&A section answered by Oda, the author himself, and even more clearly in Road to Laugh Tale Volume 3, which straight up states that Logia users embody the real natural elements and have their respective properties. So there's no question, Logias in One Piece are using the actual natural elements and have those elements' natural properties. That means characters like Enel, being literal natural lightning, would naturally have lightning speed at minimum because lightning speed is a property of lightning. Same goes for Kizaru, since he literally is natural light, and light travels at light speed, it's obvious that at minimum he gets access to light speed. Now, I want to be very clear on a few points here. Firstly, I am not saying that fake lightning or fake light can't move at the speed of the real thing. What I have painstakingly tried to specify is that they can't just automatically be assumed to have those properties, just because they look or act similarly. In contrast, real natural elements, like the ones used by Logia users, can be assumed to have their natural properties, including speed, unless stated otherwise. Secondly, just because a power system usually produces fake elements, that doesn't mean it's incapable of producing or using the real ones. For example, take Naruto. The Jutsu Kirin is literally just Sasuke using his chakra to direct down actual natural lightning from the sky. That's real lightning. And therefore, as Zetsu points out, it moves at real lightning speed. Same thing in Black Clover. While Luck usually creates fake lightning with mana, later on, when he accesses true magic, he can produce real natural lightning using mana. Thirdly, yes, the assumption that real natural elements carry their real-world properties, like light speed or lightning speed, is based on common sense. But in the case of specific series, like One Piece, this isn't even just an assumption, it's essentially an outright fact. Like take Kizaru for example, we are not just assuming that his natural light has the properties of real-world natural light like its speed. He outright tells us he has the properties of light, and he similarly tells us he attacks at the speed of light. And Oda himself through the SBS and other canonical sources like Road to Laugh Tale back this up. It's even confirmed that the Pacifistas, robots with light attacks based on Kizaru's powers, fire laser beams which are explicitly told to us to be natural light, and which are even called electromagnetic waves by Vegapunk himself. So when Kizaru says light speed, he means actual light speed. But even with all that, you'll still run into a very specific group of people, usually those trying to downplay One Piece, who play these weird semantic games. They'll say things like, well, even if it's true that Kizaru uses natural light, and even though it is the case that his natural light is even explicitly confirmed to move at light speed, even with this we still can't assume that it is the speed of light as we know it. Because after all, maybe the speed of light in the One Piece universe is different than the speed of light in our real world. Now something I've always found kind of funny is that you'll note that this argument only ever seems to come up with light. You'll notice it's almost never the case that someone makes this argument about lightning. Like for example, take Grand Line Review, a YouTuber who I actually think is well-meaning, but who in his Devil Fruit Encyclopedia video on the light fruit, states that Kizaru is not actually moving at light speed, because real-world light speed is different than the One Piece world light speed. Yet interestingly, in his Devil Fruit Encyclopedia video about the lightning fruit, he never once even implies that the lightning speed in the One Piece world is different than the lightning speed in the real world. Interesting, isn't it? But again, this is just another example of the selective suspension of disbelief that I talked about in my The Fiction Problems video. However, more importantly, let's really think about this. If Oda tells us through the manga, through the SBS, through Road to Laugh Tale, and even through Vegapunk, that Kizaru's light is real natural light, that has the properties of natural light, that is even explicitly confirmed to be electromagnetic waves, and again is even explicitly stated to be the speed of light, then what speed of light, other than the real-world speed of light would he really be referring to? Again, if we were talking about something like gravity, then sure, this kind of argument would make sense. Because you see, most people instinctively understand that gravity doesn't have just one fixed value. They understand that it varies depending on the mass of a planet or celestial body. So it's just naturally seen as more fluid. But lightning and light, on the other hand, those are a completely different story. Most people's conception of these elements is that they have very specific, defined speeds that do not have the level of variability that something like gravity does. And that's why, in fiction, most authors don't feel the need to stop and clarify that lightning speed or light speed in their story is the same as it is in the real world. So why, especially with all the context we have, are some people suddenly pretending that Oda literally needs to spell out that light speed in the One Piece world is 300,000 meters per second for us to accept that it is the same as the real world light speed? Like seriously, you know that's ridiculous. And almost everyone knows that is ridiculous. Because as I've already pointed out, no one makes this absurd argument when it comes to lightning. And nobody honestly believes that Oda references light speed without expecting us to understand what he means. Like what? Are we supposed to think that light speed in the One Piece world is actually the speed of sound? Come on now, that's just being deliberately silly. So all this acting like we have some hidden reason to think the speeds are different isn't you being some hyper-nuanced analytical genius. It's just you being purposely obtuse. Now finally, there's one last kind of argument in this category that you'll hear. That is, some people will say, okay fine, Kizaru can move at light speed, and light speed is actually the light speed we know to be light speed, but he's capped at light speed. He can't move faster than light. And once again, you'll notice this only ever comes up with light-based characters like Kizaru. Because again, when's the last time you heard someone say, yeah, it's impossible for NL to move faster than lightning speed? You don't hear that commonly, do you? It's always just Kizaru who gets boxed in like that. And that's another example of selective suspension of disbelief. But it also ties into another major problem I talked about in the fiction problem video, where people treat fiction as an all or nothing version of reality. That is, they assume that if a fictional world shares some baseline factors with the real world, like the speed of light, then it must obey all the same rules that the real world has, even at the extremes, like saying that light speed therefore needs to be the limit of speed in that fictional world. But, as explained in my The Fiction Problem video, that is just you not understanding fiction. For example, mirrors exist in both the real world and in many fictional worlds. And obviously in both reality and fiction, they generally share the same baseline feature of being able to do simple reflections. But in fiction, they can also go above the real-world restrictions of mirrors and do all kinds of crazy things, like serving as portals to an alternate location or even sucking out souls. Similarly, gravity also exists in both the real world and most fictional worlds. And obviously in both reality and fiction, they share the same baseline feature of being able to exert a force on things within the physical realm, but in fiction, gravity can go above the real-world restrictions and affect incorporeal concepts like pain and be used to steal powers. So, fictional natural light, like Kizaru's, though it shares the same baseline features of real-world natural light like light speed, the ability to be reflected, and intangibility, however, because this is fiction, it can have those features and still go beyond the real-world restriction of light to also have additional capabilities such as being able to accelerate to speeds beyond light speed, the ability to explode, and the ability to be changed into tangible physical constructs like a sword or clones of himself, or do whatever else the story needs it to do. Again, this is fiction. It does not need to have the same limitations as reality. Furthermore, as it relates to devil fruit users specifically, the crucial fact that people need to remember is that a devil fruit user is both a normal human as well as a devil fruit human. So Kizaru is both a normal man and a light man. Him being a light man just means that without any training whatsoever, he has gained the ability to move at light speed and release light-based attacks. But that does not just suddenly remove his normal human capacity to move below light speed or to train his body to react to faster than light attacks or move at faster than light speeds. So when Kizaru fires off a light beam, for example, or literally transforms and moves in his full light beam form, that light beam moves at light speed because it is a beam of light that is moving. But when Kizaru has a sword fight with Rayleigh, he obviously has the normal human capacity to swing the sword at any speed he wants. And that can obviously be below light speed, at light speed, or above light speed. He just has the advantage in that, whereas someone else would have to train to be able to swing a sword at light speed or to be able to kick at light speed, he can just do these things at light speed with no training whatsoever because he ate the light fruit and thus can apply the light speed property of light to his actions even in human form. So no, Kizaru is not limited to light speed. No Logia is limited to any speed. They are still part human and thus retain their normal human capacity to move at any speed which they train their body to move at. Now, another pretty common argument that comes up, especially from people who don't really know much about power scaling, is some version of this. Well, just because that person dodged a light beam, that doesn't mean they're faster than light. Now, I'll admit, while that's an overly simplified and almost caricatured view on how speed scaling works, there are a few people in the power scaling community who actually scale that way. You know, the ones who treat every single light dodging feat as instant proof of light speed or faster than light movement. But here's the thing, that kind of scaling is usually only limited to two groups of people. The first group is those who don't know much about power scaling, so they are scaling poorly simply because they don't know any better. The second group, on the other hand, are people who do know better, but they're being dishonest on purpose because they're trying to upscale their favorite character or verse. Almost everyone else in the power scaling community knows that this kind of blanket logic is silly, and understand that a significant proportion of light reacting feats don't translate to light speed, but rather fall within the dreaded relativistic range. And you see, how we determine where a feat lands depends on context. We look at the distance the light has to travel, the distance the character moves to avoid it, and the reaction time window. So it's not just light beam dodged equals light speed, it's more nuanced than that. However, you'll still often get people trying to present this argument at a more sophisticated level. They'll say something like, well, if I dodge a bullet that's fired at me, am I really moving faster than the bullet? Or am I just reacting faster than the person pulling the trigger? And what that is hinting at is something in the power scaling realm known as aim dodging, which refers to moving out of the way of a linear attack before it has been fired. Now, this aim dodging concept really only comes up with very specific types of feats. One of the main examples people love to throw around is when immediate post-time skip Luffy dodges the Pacifista's laser beam, and the argument often goes, well, that doesn't count because it's just observation haki. He predicted the attack and moved before it fired. As a matter of fact, this is one of the main arguments people use to try to discredit One Piece speed scaling altogether, because unlike most other verses, One Piece has a formalized system called observation haki, which allows the users to predict attacks. So I kid you not, you have a sizable cohort of people who will say in response to every conversation that it's all just observation haki aim dodging and not real speed. But even at face value, I've never really understood why people think this is some kind of gotcha moment, because even if a character can predict an attack with observation haki, they still have to be physically fast enough to move out of the way. Take Sandersonia for instance. She had basic observation haki and could predict Luffy's movements, but she still wasn't fast enough to actually hit him, and he easily tagged her. So yeah, prediction helps, but it doesn't do the work for you. And again, let's say, just for argument's sake, that Luffy dodging the Pacifista's laser was pure aim dodging. Well, that still wouldn't change the fact that functionally, while using observation haki, Luffy would demonstrably be able to deal with most light speed attacks and view them as too slow. So that critique as a means of trying to discredit One Piece characters doesn't actually accomplish anything, even if it were actually true. But let's dig a little deeper, because we know for a fact that One Piece characters' speed isn't dependent on aim dodging. First off, people forget that the Pacifistas have a lock-on system, so even if Luffy wanted to move before the laser was fired, which aim dodging definitionally requires requires, it would not matter because his position is tracked by the lock-on system before the beam is fired. And again, just as an icing on the cake, as demonstrated with Gear 2 Luffy vs Bluno, we know that if an attack is sufficiently fast, then even if you start moving before it is fired, as Bluno did, that does not matter, it will still hit you. Secondly, in the anime, it's shown that Luffy doesn't even start moving until after the lasers are already fired and are close to hitting him. So again, that's not aim dodging, as aim dodging definitionally require you to move before the attack has been fired. And thirdly, in the manga, Luffy straight up calls the laser beams too slow. I mean, come on, why would he say it's too slow if he dodged before it was even fired? Now of course, someone out there will say, the anime is not canon so we can't use that, and, well, he wasn't calling the laser too slow, he was instead calling the pacifista too slow. So just to drive this point home, let's look at Wano Chopper, who we know should not be faster than a post-time skip Luffy, nor Doflamingo, nor Katakuri, and he doesn't have observation haki. So you can't say he's using observation haki to aim dodge. Yet despite that, and despite being injured, bleeding and clearly exhausted, he still dodges a light speed beam from Queen at point blank range. And this wasn't even a situation where he was fully alert, as Chopper was literally deep in thought about Caesar Clown before Queen fired. So again, this idea that One Piece characters have to rely on observation haki to dodge light speed attacks is just flat out wrong. But wait, make no mistake, I see you that one person in the back who will still claim that Chopper somehow aim dodged this attack. Despite the circumstances which we described, which would imply otherwise, and despite us having characters even from the pre-time skip, like Captain Kidd, who remember did not have observation haki, but who managed to partially dodge a surprise lightspeed laser attack from a pacifista. But despite all of this, I'm sure there will still be some naysayers out there. So let's go even deeper and talk about Kaido, because on their initial encounter, even a Gear 4 Luffy, who we know could literally see into the future after fighting Katakuri, even this Gear 4 Luffy, while looking directly into Kaido's eyes, so we know he wasn't distracted, even this Luffy still could not react to, and was blitzed by an attack from a human form Kaido, and was knocked out in one shot. So we know for a fact that even a human form Kaido must be faster than that light speed beam, that an immediate post-time skip Luffy was not only dodging, but also calling too slow, and which a heavily injured and distracted Chopper dodged at point blank range. And just to hammer this in even further, if this still somehow was not clear enough, even after Luffy then got faster and was now finally able to perceive human form Kaido's attack, he was still hit by this attack. And Luffy even literally says that he was looking into the future, yet he still could not dodge. And after many more power-ups, we now see where even a base state Luffy is able to completely perceive and effortlessly dodge the same attack. But not simply from a base state Kaido, but rather from the exponentially faster drunken hybrid form Kaido. And again, Luffy, while in Gear 2, Gear 3 state, is also matching this drunken hybrid form Kaido blow for blow. And by the way, all this time, Kaido was not even using observation haki, so this claim that One Piece characters are dependent on observation haki aim dodging is not only useless as a means of trying to discredit the verse, but it's also unequivocally wrong on literally every possible level of analysis. This is simply just a dumb argument that you would only ever make if you are at best misinformed, and at worst, just being intentionally dishonest. Now there are a bunch of other things we could probably talk about, like the whole blitzing your shadow speed argument, particularly popular in the Bleach and Naruto fandoms. You see, this is where people will say something like Uryu blitzed his own shadow, and Rock Lee blitzed his shadow, and then try to use that as some kind of justification to scale these characters as faster than light, or in some cases massively faster than light. Now obviously this kind of argument usually only ever comes from people who either don't really know how to scale properly, or from people who are just being dishonest and looking for any possible way to upscale their favorite verse. So there's not really much to say here. It's obviously nonsense. And when you apply proper contextual scaling, it becomes very clear that these beginning of series characters are not faster than light. Similarly, when it comes to discussions about more abstract tiers of speed, like infinite speed or immeasurable speed, this is not something you should even be thinking about if you don't already have the fundamentals of power scaling down pat. These higher level concepts require a solid base understanding of how speed scaling actually works in the first place. But if you are curious and want to learn more about those speed categories, as well as the full range of speed tiers and how they're defined, you can always check out the Versus Battle Wiki page. Anyway, that's the video guys. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. But anyway, see you guys next time.